Hey guys, this is for CC Cycle 1, Week 19 Orchestra. This is our first week of Orchestra, and it's very, very easy. We are really just introducing orchestra and some instrument families and just some time periods that are in our timeline that we've already covered. It's really simple. It's a nice little baby step into orchestra. So I will go over everything with you that I'm doing for my lesson, and feel free to add some things too. I'm just going to kind of do a summary of my lesson. And you can add things, take things away, whatever you want to do. This is your class, you know your students, and it's your personality, so make it your own. Okay, so first I always start off with telling them that for the next 6 weeks we're going to be studying orchestra. And then throughout all the 6 weeks, I love to ask them questions and engage them and see what they think. So I'm going to ask them, what is orchestra? What does that mean? What is an orchestra? And see what they say, see what they come up with. And I'll let them know that an orchestra is a union of instruments or a group of instruments. We've got the strings, the brass, percussion, and woodwinds. And then next I kind of want to ask them, why is this even important? Why are we studying orchestra? See what they think. Maybe somebody has a negative attitude about it. Maybe somebody's really excited about it. But I just let them know that this is a part of our history. We learn about the timeline. This comes directly from the timeline. We talk about the Baroque period, the Renaissance period, the classical period, the Romantic period. We talk about all of those in our timeline. And we're also, just like with the great artists, we're being exposed to amazing artists and an amazing time and their techniques. So kind of the same thing here. We're going to have exposure to some of the most famous composers and their pieces, and just studying art. So I like to start off with introducing the instrument families. Something specific that I do every year is I bring my keyboard that has the different instruments. You just kind of punch it in and it'll sound like a flute or a clarinet. That is kind of over the top and it's not expected. The only reason I do it is because I have the keyboard here and I can let them hear that, but you do not need to do that. If you have a friend that maybe has a keyboard, maybe you could ask to borrow it and get your hands on it. It is definitely not necessary though. Really what I would say is a good idea is to maybe have a poster or some cutouts. In your foundations guide, they have pictures of the different instruments. And so you can copy those and cut them out, or just have copies and hold them up. This really doesn't have to be anything major. I have a little poster that gets used year after year. So if you're in this for the long haul and you're going to be a tutor for years, or maybe your campus has one that you could borrow, you guys could work on it together. It's just like 4 different posters for the instrument families, and it just has pictures of the instruments on it. So it kind of gives them a visual. So for the instruments, some of you may have been in band or have played in an orchestra. You've been a musician, so you kind of understand. And some of you might not have a clue what any instrument is called or how it sounds. So here's what I want you to do. If this is really stressful to you, don't go very deep. Just stay on the surface, learn what it's called, learn about the instrument families, and stick with that. In the Classical Music for Dummies book, looks like this. This book is so helpful for people. It really, really is. Not just the listening guide. I actually don't use the listening guide that much. That's what they want you to use it for. But if you go back to like 180, 181, and you keep going, there are pages and pages talking about each instrument, what it sounds like, what piece you can hear it from on the CD. It's very, very helpful. You can go on Google. You can go on YouTube. You can listen to different instruments if that's not too stressful for you. If it is, then you read about it and just teach it to them. I'll go over a few of the instrument families, and I'll just leave it at that for the sake of time. But go as deep with it as you want. You know, you can't really bring YouTube videos into the classroom, but you could easily look up some videos and get familiar with, like, okay, what does a flute sound like? You know. So let's start off with strings. So strings are instruments with strings that are rubbed or plucked. So maybe they're rubbed with a bow like a violin, or they're plucked with your fingers like a harp or a guitar. So violin, cello, harp, guitar, those are all strings. A lot of people want to say that piano is in the string family, but that is percussion, and we will get to that later. So that's the string family. And then next, you could go over woodwinds. This one is pretty cool because everybody in the first part of the year learned how to play a woodwind, which is the tin whistle. The tin whistle is in the woodwind family. So a woodwind would be, it's an instrument that produces sound when air is blown into it or across it. And a lot of these instruments, the reason they're called woodwinds, like flutes and stuff, they used to be made out of wood. Now they're made out of metal. But oboes and clarinets, they still use wood. They use their reed to produce the sound. So clarinets, oboes, flutes, piccolos, recorders, tin whistles, those are all woodwinds. But usually in orchestra, you hear a lot of oboes, clarinets, and flutes. Piccolo is also, but you don't hear that a lot in orchestra. More commonly the flute. So percussion. Percussion is an instrument that it makes sound when it is struck, rubbed, scratched, things like that. So a triangle, cymbal, drums, like your timpani drums, your bass drums, all of those things that you would hear in the orchestra, that's all part of percussion. So that's why piano is in the percussion instrument, because the chords are being struck, if that makes sense. When you're hitting the key, it's striking the chord. So it's in the percussion family. So let's see what else. Xylophones, any kind of like shakers, things like that, or anything that's going to be like scratched or hit, that's part of percussion. So then lastly, we'll move on to brass. So that's instruments made of metal or brass, and they make sound when you blow air into them. And a lot of times with the brass, like the trumpets, the French horn, the tubas, the musician actually has to make a vibrating like raspberry sound with their lips. When you're learning how to play any of those instruments in the beginning, your lips hurt so bad, they are so sore, because you have to press so tightly and vibrate your lips to push into that. So a lot of times in orchestra for the brass, you will hear French horns, maybe even a bugle, trombones, tubas, trumpets. That's a lot of the things that you hear in orchestra pieces. So all right, so go over the instruments as deep as you want, show pictures of them, whatever you want to do for the instruments, just kind of go over that, introduce it. And then we're going to get into the 2 time periods that we're going to be learning about for the next 6 weeks. And that is, for cycle 1, is the Baroque era and the Classical era. And like I said earlier, that's part of our timeline. So you can pull in your timeline, maybe bring your timeline card, maybe bring some other timeline cards that happened during the Baroque era and go over it. So also in the Classical Music for Dummies, this one, if you look on page, I think it's pages 18 to 26, it'll talk about the Baroque era. So that could help you out. You could Google some things if you want, or watch a YouTube video on the Baroque era. And so what I want you to do for your lesson is pick out things that are interesting, exciting, fascinating to you, and just tell them some facts about the Baroque era. It's really just a history lesson at this point. And so the 2 pieces you're going to be listening to from the Baroque era are from Handel and Bach. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over the time period. So I'm going to say the Baroque period that we learned about in timeline was from 1600 to 1750. And so I'm just going to share some interesting facts about that. Like a famous artist from the Baroque period was Rembrandt. That's usually a name that will catch people's attention. And composers, we have Vivaldi, Handel, Bach. Those were all famous composers from the Baroque period. And then also an interesting fact about the Baroque music that they would find kind of weird or interesting is that in those days, this music was like wild. It was emotional. It was dramatic. And so when they listen to it, they may not feel that way. Maybe they will, but I don't think it's that emotional and dramatic listening to it today compared to our music today. But back then it was something. So just find some cool facts, some interesting facts about the Baroque period or events that were happening during the Baroque period, and share that with your class and just go over it. So then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to play the piece from Handel, and then after play the piece from Bach that we're going to be going over in the future weeks. You do not need to go over the little nitty gritty pieces of these pieces this week. Just let them listen to it. This is not a time to be having them doing some fancy activity or coloring and drawing. Just have them sit and listen. You could turn the lights off. You could turn them off and then, I don't know, whatever you want to do. You can have the lights on. It's your classroom. Maybe they want to lay down. Just let them get comfortable and say, you know, next week we're going to go over this piece more. This is a piece from Handel. This is the name of it. And I want you to just listen to it and just let them listen to it. If you don't have time to do the whole thing because you talk so long about instruments, maybe just do a piece of it. Maybe do half of it, you know, and then move on to Bach. This is a piece from Bach. We're going to go over this in week 21. Yeah, 21. And just let them listen to it. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to dissect it or anything, and see what they thought about it. Some people might be like, I don't like that. I don't like that kind of music. And that's okay. They might like it. They might not like it. And then ask them which one they liked better. Did you guys like the one from Handel better? The one from Bach better? We're really just getting some exposure this first week. It's very, very easy. And then move on to the classical period. And you can read more about that in the Classical Music for Dummies on, let's see, what page is that? Let me look. Pages 27 to 43 in the Classical Music for Dummies, if you want to use that as a resource. If not, then maybe Google it, watch some YouTube videos, whatever you want to do. Find some interesting facts about the classical period. So the classical period, also from our timeline, pull in some timeline cards if you want, was from 1750 to about 1820. So famous artists from this time was Thomas Gainsborough. Famous composers from this time were people like Mozart and Beethoven. I'm sure your class has heard of them. So the order of it goes Renaissance, Baroque, and then you've got classical and then romantic, just like we learned in our timeline. So they should be able to have like a little bit of familiarity with that. And you can also point out too that the classical era, the music was a little lighter and cleaner, not so complex as the Baroque period. But we can get into more of those pieces in the future weeks. So then just let them, so just say your facts that you found that are really interesting or funny or weird about the classical period. Just shoot out some facts, tell them a little bit about the classical period, and then let them listen to the piece from Mozart. Again, just let them get comfortable. You don't have to do an activity. Just let them listen to it. CC has, I mean, I've always felt this way, but CC has really geared the 5th edition towards just let them listen. And that is so important. I never did any kind of fancy activities or anything when they were listening. They really just need to just relax and just listen to it. That's all they need to do. And then see which of the 3 pieces, what did you like the best? Did you like the Baroque pieces better, the classical piece better? What did you really like? And that's okay. Whatever their answer is, that's totally okay. And just let them know that I think week 22, we're going to be going into this piece more. So that's honestly, that is it. You're just introducing orchestra this week. It's going to be the easiest week. And then for weeks 20, 21, and 22, all those pieces and composers you went over, we're going to dig deeper into those, and I will totally help you with that. But really for now, it's just talking about what is orchestra, why is it important to learn this, what are the instrument families, and what instruments fall into those families, and then the Baroque period and the classical period. That's really it. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, but it's just that simple for week 19. It's just a simple introduction. Okay,